The murder of Helen Jewett is a very interesting murder case that occurred on April 10, 1836, in Lower Manhattan, New York City. Helen Jewett was allegedly murdered by a man named Richard P. Robinson. The murder case went to trial and he was found not guilty. There were many versions of what happened that night and many controversies during the trial that the jury was instructed to go against key witnesses' testimonies and who Helen Jewett actually was. Helen Jewett was born in the state of Maine in January 1812, but her actual birth name was Maria Benson. Her father worked in the lumber industry, but unfortunately died a year after her birth. Her mother was left to support her child by herself, so she began teaching at a country school. When Helen was 6, her mother died, and she was taken in by Judge Western's family. In 1826, she moved to Portland to attend a female seminary. She then moved to Boston, where she resided in 1829 and took the name of Helen Jewett. She was kept by a wealthy Southern gentleman where she was a mistress, but the most predominant establishment where she lived was a house in Franklin Street, whom the housekeeper was Rosina Townsend. The murder occurred on April 10, 1836, between the hours of 12 and 3 in the morning. Helen was murdered by a blow to the head by a hatchet and was set on fire. Her body was badly burned by the blaze. There are multiple stories of what happened that night, from Richard P. Robinson, who was the accused murderer, and from a gentleman that was fully acquainted with Helen, as seen in the primary sources. Richard P. Robinson said that he was at her house that night, but believes Mrs. Townsend, the housekeeper, would have no idea that it was him there. When Mrs. Townsend brought wine up to the both of them, Helen quickly opened the door just to get the wine and shut it immediately. And Robinson said that he had his back to the door, so he believes that she would have not known it was him. During her testimony, she said that she saw him, and he believes that there's no way she could have known. Also, he was the last person to see her alive. There was no one else that came and visited her that night. There was evidence of his cloak that was found in the backyard. There was also evidence that someone went over a white fences in the backyard, and when he was found in his bed, he had white paint marks on him. He admits to being there, jumping over the fences, but he says that he was back at his boarding house when the clock struck 1, and it puts him there during the times of the murder, so we don't know if he was lying. The lies don't end there. During the trial, many suspicious things happened. There were many different testimonies that conflicted each other, and some of the jury was said to be friends of Robinson. The judge also told the jury that the testimonies from the prostitutes were not entitled to credit unless their testimonies are drawn from other sources. Robert Furlong's testimony was said to have gotten Robinson off without any punishment. Later, he committed suicide, which is said to be because he lied during the case and had a guilty conscience. During this time in history, women were not really protected or valued. For example, rapes could be committed and blamed on the women, saying that it was their fault because of the way they were dressed, the things that they did or said. Women were not valued equally, and prostitutes' characters were criticized greatly. Their testimony was not considered to be accurate and had no value in the courts. Prostitutes were not treated like human beings and are seen as objects. During the time of the murder in 1836, Sarah Grimke began her career as a women's rights advocate, but was eventually silenced by male advocates who considered her public speaking to be a liability. And in 1837, the first National Female Anti-Slavery Society Convention met in New York City. During the time of this murder, there were many female rights movements that started around, but all of them basically were silenced by male advocates. This event that happened in 1836 is an important part of history as it illustrates how women were treated and devalued. We could learn from this event, the murder of Helen, to improve women's rights.